Here's Civics episode number 22. And the question I want to ask today is, why is voting both a right and a responsibility? These are civics questions that I think are worth asking. And as a government and a civics and a history teacher, I do spend a lot of time reminding students that civics is more than just the Constitution test. It is about understanding the way power, political power, rights, responsibilities, and how the rules of self-government impact our lives under our system of government. So, why is voting both a right and a responsibility? Well, voting is one of the clearest ways that citizens can exercise political power. And in a republic, the people don't just, they don't vote on every law or every public decision directly. Instead, we choose representatives and we choose our public officials who make many of those decisions on our behalf. And that means voting is not just a personal preference. It's actually part of how self-government works. So voting is a right because the ability to participate in elections is connected to political equality. If citizens can be unfairly excluded from voting, then government no longer fully rests on the consent of the governed, going back to the Declaration. And American history makes this point very clear. Because for most of our history, voting rights were limited, and they're limited by race or sex or property, age, intimidation, discriminatory laws, unequal access, Jim Crow, the whole system in the South. But anyway, the expansion of voting rights didn't happen automatically. It came through constitutional amendments, legislation, court cases, activism, protest, sacrifice, and also long civic struggle. And that history reminds us that voting isn't just this small thing. It's a right that people fought to secure. But voting is also a responsibility. Now, that doesn't mean that citizens should be forced to vote or that every person will always feel inspired by the choices on the ballot, because sometimes elections can be quite frustrating. Sometimes the candidates that are put forward are kind of disappointing, and in other elections, some folks feel like they're being ignored. And you have others where sometimes voters look at politics and see more noise than they actually see public service. But responsibility doesn't just disappear just because the choices are imperfect. In a republic, citizens share responsibility for who holds power and how that power is used. So voting is one way that citizens help decide who writes laws and budgets and oversees schools, who appoints officials or enforces policies, and also represents the public. Now, that's true in national elections, but it may be even more visible in local elections. I did a whole episode on local government. You have school board members, county officials, city councils, township officers. In some states, we have judges, and you also have sheriffs and clerks and assessors, and then local boards that can affect daily life in very direct ways. Yet those elections often have a much lower turnout. And that means a smaller number of voters can have a large influence over decisions that affect the entire community. So voting responsibility also means doing more than showing up and just guessing. A responsible voter should try to understand the offices on the ballot and the candidates that are running and the issues at hand and the powers those officials actually have. It's a lot of work. Now, that does not require becoming an expert on everything, though. But, like I said, it does require some effort. You need to know who's running, what does this office do, what are the candidates saying, what have they done before, what powers would they actually have if they were elected? And those are civics questions worth asking before casting a ballot, because voting is not only the responsibility of citizenship, because citizens can also attend meetings and contact officials and serve on juries and volunteer, serve publicly, run for office, work as election judges, and just generally stay informed. But voting is one of the most basic ways citizens participate in shared power. It is also one of the most peaceful ways a society handles agreement. So, people argue, They organize, they campaign, they persuade, then they vote. And in a healthy republic, those who lose accept the lawful result and they continue participating. Now, we've found out that's not always easy, but it is essential. Now, voting matters because power will be exercised whether we participate or not. Budgets will be passed and laws will be written. School policies will be adopted. Taxes will still be levied. Courts will still function and officials will still take office. If citizens stay home, the decisions don't stop. They're simply made. They just have less input from the public. So, why is voting both a right and a responsibility? Well, it's a right because citizens should have a fair voice in choosing their government. It's a responsibility because self-government depends on citizens using that voice thoughtfully. So the real civic question is not whether one vote always changes an election by itself. The real question is what happens to a republic when too many citizens decide their voice does not matter. Because voting is not the entirety, the whole of citizenship. But it is one of the clearest reminders that in a republic, government is not supposed to be something done to the people. It's supposed to be something done through the people. And today, on this Sunday, I really felt like that was a civics question that was worth asking. If you feel like you know someone that could benefit from getting this little bit of information, please take the time to share it. Get the word out. I would really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing my civics message. Take care.